Ladies and gentlemen, we have a different reaction today. We're gonna be reacting to forgotten players' profiles. All right, about the one and only, the best teammate that Larry Bird ever had, and Magic Johnson's toughest defender, Dennis Johnson. No, Johnson. Johnson. Dennis Johnson. Let's jump right in.
You really don't know how good a guy is until he plays on your team. DJ is one of the best players, or the best player I ever played with.
Every game was a defensive masterclass. When he was guarding you, it was suffocating. And
Damn.
any mistake could lead to a turnover, with his quick reflexes and uncanny ability to poke the ball loose. And even if you felt like you had a clean shot, you still
What?
weren't safe, as the man they called Airplane could come out of nowhere for a block, as he was one of the greatest shot blocking guards of all time. He might not have the crazy steal and block numbers, but his defensive IQ was through the roof, and he always seemed to make the right play. But he was more than a specialist, as Johnson could score quite well, especially during his time with Seattle and Phoenix, when he had more offensive responsibility and more athleticism. But then when he got to Boston, even though his scoring dropped a bit, he would just show you that he was one of the best passers in the league, as there were very few holes in his game. He had a reputation for being a difficult player, going all the way back to his college days, but he also had the reputation of being a winner everywhere he went. And the 80s Celtics dynasty doesn't happen with
Hold on, before they continue, you know that comment that they normally always mention, a player is difficult to be around, right? All right, let's see who can I mention. They were talking about Jimmy Butler, and the Timberwolves, and then he was either traded. Then he was traded to Miami. They did what they did those years that they had him. It's not about being difficult. It's about Kobe Bryant. They said the same thing about Kobe Bryant, but Kobe Bryant wanted to win. Yo, if you don't have that mindset of wanting to win, and you're just lollygagging, you're lazy, or you just want to put up however much of a performance that you want, how could that be being a difficult person? Number one. Number two, him being in Seattle and Phoenix as the number one option. They just talked about him being a number one option and him scoring and everything. But then him coming to Boston, not having to be, the focal point, but then he could focus on being the true point guard, that setting the offense, passing the ball, and then most importantly, putting the clamps on the best player on the opposite side of the ball. That stigma of being a difficult. If you want to win and you become a hole, how could that be that you're a difficult player? You want to win. There's standards that you set. If you're not setting those standards, or even, like, I'm trying to find the words here. How could you be a difficult player if you know you have like a mindset, you have a standard of winning, but then you don't want to win. You want to do what you want to do, and there's no showing up to practice early. There's no leaving practice late. Like, bro, come on, man. How could that be that you're calling these people difficult to be around, or difficult? Come on, man. Nah, man. I don't believe that. He's a winner. He's been a winner. He won everywhere he went. Come on now. That's a winner's mindset.
without the addition of DJ. And yes, Dennis Johnson is a Hall of Famer, but it took way too long for him to end up there. And you seldom hear his name when talking about the all-time great point guards, yet he was one of the best to ever do it. Let's jog your memory. A California native, Johnson grew up as one of 16 children in Compton, where you would have never guessed he would one day be in the
16?
Basketball Hall of Fame. He was cut from his school team in the 7th and 8th grade, and then attended the storied Dominguez High School. But by his senior year, he was just 5'9", and for the most part rode the bench. And after he graduated with zero college interest, he took a job as a forklift operator. But he always loved basketball and the competition, so he would
Nice.
continue playing in summer league games with his brothers. And during that time, his body started changing, as he would grow into a solid 6'3" frame and his legs
Wow.
became springs. So now he wasn't just playing summer league games, he was dominating them, and he caught the attention of Jim White, who was the coach of LA Harbor Junior College, and Johnson was given a scholarship. Johnson would spend the next 2 years with the Seahawks, but it would be up and down. There was no denying his on-court talent, as by his sophomore season he would average 18.3 points and 12 rebounds, while leading Harbor to the state junior college title. But in getting to that point, Johnson had frequently clashed with White due to his stubbornness and overall unpredictability, as Johnson had been kicked off the team 3 times in his 2 seasons. But he had reportedly began to mature as his sophomore season was winding down, and his coach didn't hold a grudge, as he was hyping him up as a D1 prospect whenever he could. And even though most schools wouldn't take the chance on a player with a reputation for having behavior issues, he would receive a couple offers and accept a scholarship for nearby Pepperdine, as the once 5'9" kid riding the bench just a few years earlier was going to be a D1 starter in 1976. Johnson joined an established Waves team who had featured a top 20 scoring offense in the nation the season prior, and while they wouldn't be the same offensive powerhouse, the addition of Johnson helped the team go from the 205th ranked scoring defense in 1975 to the 49th ranked scoring defense in 1976.
Nice. That's big jump.
Johnson would play the most
Big
minutes
jump.
per game on the team and would finish second in scoring and assists. So
Nice.
the Waves would have a great year, as they would finish the regular season at 22-4, which included an 8-game win streak to end the season. And on top of that, they had gone 10-2 in conference play to win the regular season West Coast Athletic Conference Championship, with 3 members of the team, including Johnson, being named first team all-conference. So their great year had seen them crack the nation's top 20 and earn an NCAA tournament berth, where they would take on Memphis in the first round. Johnson would have an off game, putting up just 10 points on 3 of 9 shooting, along with 8 turnovers, but would chip in 6 rebounds and 5 assists, as the Waves were still able to take the win and advance to the West Regional Semis, to take on powerhouse UCLA. The Bruins would get the win, but Pepperdine had surprisingly kept it within single digits, as Johnson had played great defense on Bruins guard Andre McCarter, while putting up a team-high 16 points on 50% shooting and pulling down 6 rebounds.
Nice.
But Johnson's first year of D1 ball would end with him averaging about 15.5 points, 6 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. In what was a bit of a surprise, yet something Johnson must have felt necessary, he would apply as a hardship case in hopes of entering the NBA early, as he had only just completed his junior season. And he was an obvious candidate, as his family home had burned down during his first semester this year. And his Harbor College coach, along with future teammates, would say that he was proud, but he was poor, and he would be granted an exception as a hardship case to enter the '76 NBA draft. Yet he was still reportedly doubtful that NBA teams would have interest in him. But lucky for him, his tough defensive style of play had caught the attention of Supersonics GM and former Celtics great Bill Russell. And when the second round came, Seattle scooped up Johnson. After barely making the team, Johnson signed a 4-year deal which would see him earn $45,000 his first year, which was a lot better than staying in college for free. But he wouldn't be a major part of the team as a rookie. In addition to being GM, Russell was also the head coach, but he already had a backcourt in place with guards Slick Watts and Fred Brown. But as Russell utilized the deep rotation, Johnson would still get over 20 minutes per game in 81 appearances, and would play efficiently, putting up over 9 points on over 50% shooting, while also pulling down nearly 4 rebounds and finishing as one of 3 players on the team to average at least 1.5 steals. However, although the Sonics had one of the league's better defenses, they were also one of their worst offenses, as they would only manage 40 wins, which would not be enough for a playoff berth, as Johnson's rookie year had seen him average about 9 points, 4 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. Going into 1978, Russell had resigned as head coach and GM, as the Sonics would bring in Zoli Volchok as their new GM, and he would appoint assistant Bob Hopkins as head coach. But as a GM, Russell was busy. He would orchestrate an offseason trade with Denver to acquire big man Marvin Webster, and would also sign guard Gus Williams as a free agent, while selecting another big man in the draft in Jack Sigma. The Sonics would go just 5-17 to start the year, before Hopkins was replaced with former Sonics great Lenny Wilkins. Johnson had continued coming off the bench under Hopkins, but was getting significantly less minutes than he was last year. Yet once Wilkins took over, he would say that a backcourt of Johnson and Williams would make a difference. So almost immediately after his hiring, Johnson became the starter and would respond, as his scoring jumped significantly, with him putting up double figures in 55 of the 60 games under Wilkins. As a young Johnson would play shooting guard and be more known for great jumping and his play around the rim. But this new backcourt would lead to the Sonics trading Watts to the Jazz in early January. And on top of this, Seattle would now feature the league's second best scoring defense. But when Wilkins first took over, it wasn't looking good for a 5-17 Sonics team. But they would then win 18 of their next 21 and would continue to build on that throughout the season to finish at 47-35 and get a first-round matchup with the Lakers. Johnson would be one of 6 Sonics to average double figures and would also average a steal per game. But overall, it wouldn't be a great playoff debut, as he would shoot less than 38% from the field. He did score in double figures over the first 2 games, which the team split, but would have just 9 points in Game 3. Yet the Sonics won to advance to a second-round matchup with Portland. Although Johnson's numbers look mostly the same this series, he would shoot 50% from the field. He would start well with 19 points, 6 boards, and 4 assists in a Game 1 win, but over the next 2 games would average just 10.5 points on 25% shooting. But he would pull himself out of the slump to average nearly 15 points and 5 rebounds on over 63% shooting across the final 3 games, as Seattle won in 6 and were set to take on Denver in the conference finals. Johnson would have his hands full with the Nuggets' David Thompson, but each of them would have their moments getting the best of each other. After a poor Game 1, Johnson would put up double figures in every remaining game of the series to finish second on the team in scoring behind Williams, but he would only shoot about 39%. On the defensive end, he had done great on Thompson, as after 4 games, he had held Skywalker to an average of 21 points on less than 35% shooting, with the Sonics up 3-1. Thompson would get the better of Johnson in Game 5, as he finished with 35 points on over 59% shooting, but then Johnson would hold him to 21 on 7 of 17 shooting in a Game 6 win, as the Sonics were making a trip to the NBA Finals to take on the Washington Bullets. Johnson would again struggle to find his shot, as for the series he shot below 39%, but would be the Sonics' second leading scorer, as he would have a 33-point performance in a Game 4 loss. And on the defensive end, he would have some stellar play, as he averaged nearly 2.5 blocks per game for the series, including a postseason career high of 7 blocks in a Game 2 win, which is also a finals record for a guard. After 5 games, Johnson was averaging over 20 points on over 49% shooting, and the Sonics were up 3-2. But then in a Game 6 blowout loss, he had just 9 points on 4 of 16 shooting. Then with a chance to win it on their home court in Game 7, Johnson finished with just 4 points, while going 0 of 14 from the field, as the Sonics would come up short, losing to Washington by 6. But Johnson's second season had seen him average about 12.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. Yet Johnson and the Sonics would redeem themselves in 1979. Johnson was a full-time starter now, and alongside Sikma and Williams would combine to average nearly 50 points per game, as Johnson had upped his scoring for the 3rd straight year, while also improving his rebounding and assist numbers, as this season would see him hit double figures in 64 games, including 24 with at least 20. And now with Wilkins at the helm to begin the year, the Sonics would come out of the gate with 7 straight wins, and by the All-Star break, they were 34-16. As Johnson would earn his first career All-Star selection. They would cool off a bit afterwards, as they were only able to go 18-14 the rest of the way, but they still featured the league's top scoring defense, with Johnson earning a first-team all-defense selection, and their 52-30 record would get them the top seed in the West, as they would get a matchup with the Lakers in the conference semifinals, and it became obvious quickly that a postseason redemption was Johnson's top priority. Johnson would finish second on the team in scoring behind Williams and would shoot a respectable 44.6%, while also pulling down over 6 rebounds per game. He would put up 26 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, and 5 steals in a Game 1 win, then follow that up with 17 points, 4 boards, and 3 more steals in a Game 2 win. The Lakers would take Game 3, as although Johnson had 18 points and 8 rebounds, he shot just 6 of 18 from the field, but he would come back in Game 4 with 23, 11, and 7 in a 2-point win. And then the Sonics would close it out in Game 5, as Johnson finished with 21 points and 3 steals. The second round brought the Suns, and Johnson continued his great play. He would again be the team's second leading scorer, averaging nearly 20 points along with 6 rebounds and 3.5 assists per game. Seattle would win the first 2 games, but would then drop 3 straight, as they would now be facing elimination in Game 6. But Johnson would respond with 23 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists on 62% shooting in a 1-point win to force a Game 7. Then even though he shot just 8 of 21 from the field, he still finished with 26 points, and the Sonics would win to advance to a finals rematch with Washington, where Johnson would definitely redeem himself. Johnson would go for 23 points, 7 assists, and 3 steals in Game 1. But with the score tied and the clock hitting 0, Johnson was called for a very iffy foul on the Bullets' Larry Wright, as he would go to the line needing 1 free throw to win the game, and he would hit both to give the Bullets a controversial 1-0 lead. Johnson would come back with 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists in an easy Game 2 win, then would follow that up with 17, 9, and 9 in another easy Sonics win, as they went up 2-1. Game 5 would be another close one, as with the Sonics up by 2 with about 5 seconds left, and Washington having possession, Johnson would be the hero this time, as he would record his 5th block of the game on the Bullets' game-winning attempt,
5 blocks?
as Seattle went up 3-1. And then in Game 5, Johnson would finish with 21, 4, and 5, as Seattle won by 4 and got their revenge, which was even sweeter for Johnson after he was named Finals MVP. But his overall season had seen him average about 16 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. 1980 would be one of the best years of Johnson's career. He would finish second on the team in scoring, while also finishing second on the team in steals, and being one of 2 players on the team to average at least a steal and a block per game. But he was also shooting a lot more than he usually would, and would see his efficiency drop. And in the first year of the NBA implementing the 3-point line, he finished second on the team with 58 attempts. But with the way his contract was structured, he was set to make nearly $100,000 this year, and reportedly felt the need to justify this with more offensive production. But he would hit double figures in 74 games, and even record 8 games with at least 30, along with 6 double-doubles. And he would still remain one of the league's best defenders, as he would again be named an All-Star and a member of the All-Defensive First Team. But he would also get a second-team All-NBA selection, and even finish top 5 in MVP voting. Seattle continued their dominance, even stringing together 8-game win streaks in both January and February, as they would top their franchise record win total from last year by finishing this year at 56-26, which would be good for the second seed in the West. Seattle would get a first-round matchup with Portland, and Johnson would again finish second to Williams in scoring, while also averaging over 3.5 steals per game, as he would even record 6 steals in a Game 3 blowout win to help Seattle complete the sweep. The second round would be a much tougher series versus Milwaukee. Johnson would put up 24 points on just 6 of 18 shooting in Game 1, but the Sonics were able to squeak out the win, as Johnson made a historic shot.
Down the court. They've got to do that and get it in front court. Dennis three-pointer. Good.
Hey, yo!
Johnson's last-second three-pointer would mark the first game-winning three-pointer in postseason history, as this would be his only made 3 of the series. Over the next 5 games, Johnson would average about 18.5 points, 4 assists, and 2 steals, as the teams were locked in a back-and-forth battle, with only one of the first 6 games being decided by more than 5 points.
Offensive
and
foul?
Game 7 would follow that pattern, yet Johnson struggled, as he would finish with just 8 points on 3 of 13 shooting, yet would record 4 steals, as the Sonics won by 4, to advance to a conference finals matchup with the Lakers. However, these Lakers were a lot different, as they now featured Magic Johnson, and the series would not go well for Seattle. Johnson would have just 2 points in 23 minutes of action in a tight Game 1 win, but would play much better afterwards, averaging over 21 points and 5 rebounds over the rest of the series. But he would shoot below 42%, as the Sonics would drop 4 straight, to miss out on a 3rd consecutive finals appearance. But Johnson's season had seen him average about 19 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. But a big change was coming over the offseason. Johnson would be traded to the Phoenix Suns for Paul Westphal, reportedly in part due to his ill-advised shooting over the season. But then after the trade, Wilkins would refer to Johnson as a locker room cancer, as he had earned a reputation as a locker room lawyer throughout the end of his time in Seattle. Although he had been receiving a larger amount of money in the final year of his contract, he had still been in a dispute with the Sonics over the course of the year, as he felt he was worth something more in the ballpark of $500,000, and expressed that if the Sonics didn't give him that, then he would not re-sign with the team, which led to him being traded. But Johnson would say years later that the Phoenix trade was the best thing to happen at that time.
Yeah,
The Suns were already a good team with guys like Truck Robinson and Alvin Adams, and the addition of Johnson would only help them get better. With the Suns already featuring star shooting guard Walter Davis, Johnson would become the team's point guard, which would become his primary position for the remainder of his career. Their backcourt duo, along with Robinson, would give the Suns a trio who averaged over 55 points per game, as Johnson was giving virtually the same production as he had in Seattle. He would hit double figures in 73 games and would drop his career high of 39 points in a February 15th loss to New York. And Phoenix was one of the league's top teams, sitting at 41-16 going into the All-Star break. As even with a new team, Johnson would still be an All-Star and would again be named first team All-Defense, as well as get his only first team All-NBA selection while finishing top 10 in MVP voting. And although Phoenix would go just 16-9 after the break,
previously he was top 5, top 10. Come on, man. Give my guy some flowers, man. Give my guy some flowers. This man, beast. No, and he does the little things too. Really, hey, that man, that's good. That's good.
they would still feature a top 10 scoring offense and top 3 scoring defense, and finish with a then franchise best 57-25 record, as they would get a first round bye and then play the Kings in the semis. Johnson would play a great series, as he would lead the Suns in scoring on an improved 47.3% shooting while playing over 38 minutes per game and also averaging over a steal and a block. Yet after a Game 1 win, Phoenix would drop 3 straight, and even though they would rally to force a Game 7, they would shockingly lose, even though Johnson did all he could, finishing with 28-7-5 in the do-or-die game. But this upset brought an abrupt end to a season which saw Johnson average about 19 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. The 81 draft had seen the Suns scoop up an athletic forward out of Clemson in Larry Nance. But then during a late October exhibition game, Davis would hit the ground awkwardly and fracture his elbow, which required surgery, as he would only appear in 55 games this season and be used mostly as a sixth man when he did return. So Kyle Macy would take his place, but would not be able to replicate his production. With the loss of Davis, Johnson would up his scoring, as his 19.5 points per game would be a career high and would lead the team, and his 47% shooting would be his highest average since his rookie year, with his 4.6 assists being second on the team. Johnson would hit double figures in 73 games while putting up at least 30 in 4 games and recording 7 double-doubles, as he would earn his 4th straight All-Star selection and yet another first-team All-Defense selection. The Suns still had a top...
Oh, man. All-Defense, All-Stars, All-NBA, Finals MVP, winning and winning and winning wherever he goes. Oh, man. Underrated. He's super underrated. I didn't know until now. Now I see why. Let's see. Go to Seattle. Go to Phoenix. Where is Dennis Johnson's next stop?
3 scoring defense, but their scoring offense had dropped to the bottom half of the league, as they would in turn finish with a 46-36 record, but it would still be enough for a first-round playoff matchup with Denver. After putting up 14 points in a Game 1 loss, Johnson would lock in and average 27.5 points on nearly 54% shooting, along with over 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals over the next 2 games, as Phoenix won both to advance to a second-round matchup with the Lakers. But similar to 2 years earlier, Johnson would get bounced by the Lakers quite easily. For the series, he would put up great averages of about 22 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2.5 steals. But the Lakers were just too much, as the Suns' third-ranked scoring defense allowed over 114 points per game and were swept. But for the regular season, Johnson averaged about 19.5 points, 5 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game. 1983 was a down year for Johnson, compared to how he had produced up to this point. Davis would come back to have a great year, and a second-year Nance would break out, while the Suns would also get a lot of production out of the newly acquired Maurice Lucas. But although Johnson's scoring had dropped by over 5 points per game, he still shot over 46% for the second consecutive season, and his 5 assists per game were a then career high. The Suns had a very capable starting lineup, with all 5 players averaging at least 14 points. So Johnson didn't need to worry as much about scoring, and he was still his usual defensive self, as he would earn his 5th consecutive first-team all-defense selection. And he would still manage 60 games in double figures and 17 games with at least 20, while also recording 5 double-doubles and a career-high 6 steals on 2 different occasions, with both of them coming versus the Clippers. So a full-strength Suns team would improve to finish with a 53-29 record, as they would get another first-round matchup with Denver. And although it was another series which went the distance, it wouldn't be in Phoenix's favor. The Suns would take Game 1 in a blowout, as Johnson put up 28 points on over 68% shooting, along with 12 rebounds, 8 assists, and 4 steals. But in a Game 2 blowout loss, he finished with just 10 points on 4 of 15 shooting. And then Denver would outlast Phoenix in Game 3, as Johnson had 16 points and 8 rebounds on 5 of 14 shooting. But for the regular season, he averaged about 14 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. But Johnson was in the middle of more conflict in Phoenix, and he had worn out his welcome. Over the offseason, Johnson was traded to Boston, as this trade would end up being a steal for the Celtics, acquiring Johnson and a first-round pick for a package headlined by role player Rick Roby and 2 second-round picks. Johnson had been shipped away in most part for his opposition of Phoenix's discipline system, often clashing with head coach John McLeod, as he really didn't like to practice. And for as good of an acquisition that Celtics star Larry Bird knew that this was, it was also difficult for him, as Roby was one of his best friends on the team. But over the next 7 seasons, Johnson would more than prove his worth. The Celtics were already one of the league's best teams, led by their big 3 of Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, and Kevin McHale. but after winning the title in '81, they had yet to make a return to the finals. And the Sixers' Andrew Toney had been giving the Celtics fits whenever they met in the postseason, so GM Red Auerbach hoped that a defensive ace like Johnson would remedy that problem. And after the acquisition of Johnson, they would waive the aging Nate Archibald. Additionally, they would have a new coach in Casey Jones. Johnson would slot in as the team's starting point guard. He would never be the same scorer that he was over the first half of his career, but he didn't have to be with all the firepower the Celtics had. And his value would be in his defense and overall ability to direct the team on both ends of the floor.
We just gonna insert this clip like it's nothing. What?
His value would be in his defense and overall ability to direct the team on both ends of the floor. Although his scoring average was his lowest in 5 seasons, he would still hit double figures in 59 games and record 2 double-doubles. But the addition of Johnson helped the Celtics immensely on defense, as they had a top 3 defensive rating. And although he would miss out on another first-team all-defense selection, he would still get a spot on the second team, and would even finish 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting. Wow. And now with an improved defense and the same great offense, the Celtics would finish with a league-best 62-10 record, and get a first-round matchup with the Bullets. This would be a surprisingly close series, as each game was decided by 8 points or less. And although Johnson would shoot below 38% for the series, he would still be second on the team in scoring and assists, as he would hit double figures in every game. Boston would go up 2-0 before dropping Game 3, but would then take Game 4 to advance to a second-round matchup with New York. Wow. This series would be a great battle between Bird and the Knicks' Bernard King, as Johnson took mostly a back seat, yet would still be a great contributor, putting up about 15.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game, as he would hit double figures in 5 out of the 6 games he appeared in. He would miss Game 6, but would come back to put up 21 points and 6 assists in Game 7 to help Boston.
Man, I tell you what. Just based on listening to Dennis Johnson's stat line from Seattle to Phoenix to Boston. Respectable numbers, man. Now, respectable numbers. He could have an off game, of course, but then when it's time to contribute, this man is underrated. Double digits and scoring, but we know where he is, man. I'm a defense type of person. Man, you putting them clamps, man. You getting them steals and them blocks. Hey, man. Dennis Johnson's underrated.
Take the series, setting up a conference finals matchup with Milwaukee. Johnson would score well against the Bucks' great defensive backcourt, as he would again be the team's second leading scorer, while pulling down over 5 rebounds and dishing over 3 assists per game, as he would hit double figures in every game. But Boston would overpower Milwaukee, as they would easily go up 3-0, and then after the Bucks avoided a sweep, the Celtics would close it out in Game 5, with Johnson putting up 17 points and 9 rebounds, as Johnson and the Celtics were making their return to the finals. The finals would bring the Magic Johnson-led Lakers, as this was the first time Magic and Bird would meet on the big stage. But DJ would make sure that life for Magic would be difficult. Dennis Johnson would again finish second to Bird in scoring, but would shoot below 40%, yet it was on the defensive end that he really made a difference. Boston would fall behind 2-1, which included an embarrassing 33-point loss in Game 3, as after 3 games, Johnson was putting up about 12 points on 34% shooting, and Magic was averaging nearly 20 points and over 13 assists on over 67% shooting. But DJ would turn it around after this.
Nice.
He would help contain Magic, as although Magic would average nearly 14 assists, his scoring had dropped by over 2 points per game, while shooting only around 49% and committing 5.5 turnovers per game over the next 4, including 7.
There it is. There it is. You may not. You could be guarding the other player's best player. Scoring decreased just a tad bit. You know what's the most important stats? Them 5 turnovers that he was on Magic Johnson. That's very important. You're guarding the best point guard on the opposite side. Dennis Johnson. I know he relished that challenge. Man, you caused Magic to have 5 turnovers per game. You did a really great job, man.
turnovers in Game 7, and DJ would put up at least 20 points in each of the final 4 games, as Boston would win 3 of these games, resulting in them winning their 15th title, and Johnson's second, as his first season in Boston had seen him average about 13 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. It was much of the same in Boston during the '85 season. Their big three continued to dominate, and they would get a breakout season from a fourth-year Danny Ainge, as he had become a starter due to the Celtics trading Gerald Henderson to the Sonics shortly before the start of the season, as this trade had netted them the pick that became Len Bias in the '86 draft. Johnson would have his highest scoring average as a member of the Celtics in '85, but in addition to that, his 6.8 assists per game would be a career high up to that point. He would hit double figures in 69 games, including 24 with at least 20. As well as 15 double-doubles, and a March 12th victory over Atlanta would see him dish his officially recorded career high of 17 assists to go along with 15 points, as this great season would get him his final All-Star selection, and his defensive impact continued to be recognized with yet another second-team All-Defense selection and a top 10 finish in DPOY voting, as the Celtics would finish at 63-19 and get a first-round matchup with Cleveland. Boston would win this series in 4 games, but it was a bit of a scare, as each of their 3 wins came by 3 points or less. Johnson would put up nearly 19 points per game for this series and lead the team in assists, as he would record 2 double-doubles. The second round brought a young but improving Pistons team, and this would be a great offensive series for Johnson, as he would average about 17 points and 6 assists while shooting over 57% from the field. He would have a combined 8 points over the first 2 games, but the Celtics would win both, as he would then hit double figures in each remaining game, as the Celtics took the series in 6. To advance to a conference finals matchup with Philly and the Boston Strangler, Andrew Toney. Johnson would play great on the offensive end, as he would average about 18 points and 6.5 assists on nearly 47% shooting. But his defense would see him average nearly 2 steals per game, and after Toney would average over 22 points per game against Boston in 1982, he would average less than 18 this series, and his 25 total turnovers would lead all players. Then with the Celtics up 3-1, Johnson would help hold Toney to 13 points on 5 of 12 shooting, along with 6 turnovers, as Boston took the game and the series to get another finals matchup with LA. Johnson would have a double-double in a Game 1 blowout win, but then over the next 2 games, he would average just 11.5 points on a combined 9 of 32 shooting, as the Lakers won both. Game 4 was a close one, but with about 20 seconds left, Johnson was up to 25 points and 12 assists, as Boston was up by 2. But then Magic Johnson would secure an offensive rebound and get the putback to tie the game at 105. But the Celtics would have one last chance to win the game, but LA sent the double at Bird.
Yep.
Johnson had delivered a pass to Bird, but after an immediate double team, he would kick it back out to Johnson, who would pull up and drain a shot at the buzzer to give the Celtics the win and tie the series. Then Johnson would have 22 points and 11 assists in Game 5, but the Lakers got the win. And then after putting up just 11 points on 3 of 15 shooting in Game 6, the Lakers won again, as the Celtics had failed their opportunity to repeat. But Johnson's regular season had seen him average about 15.5 points, 4 rebounds, and 7 assists per game. But the following year would see Boston roll out one of the best teams in NBA history. The team again looked very similar, but they had traded Cedric Maxwell to the Clippers for Bill Walton, as they would shift Kevin McHale, who had just won back-to-back 6th Man of the Year awards, into the starting lineup. And coincidentally, Walton would end up winning 6th Man of the Year for the '86 season, as this year would also see Bird win his 3rd consecutive MVP award. But Johnson continued to quietly give the team his consistent two-way production. His numbers were similar to last year, and he would shoot over 45% for the final time in his career. He would hit double figures in 65 games and record 2 double-doubles, and was a crucial contributor to the Celtics' league best defensive rating, as once again he was voted second team all-defense. The Celtics would string together an 8-game and 9-game win streak within the first 20 games of the season, then would put together a 13-game win streak from mid-January to early February, soon after followed by an 8-game win streak and then a 14-game win streak, as the Celtics only had 2 instances of losing 2 games in a row this season, finishing with the league best 67-15 record. Their first round series versus Chicago is best remembered for Michael Jordan's 63-point Game 2 performance. But the Celtics would sweep Chicago, and Johnson would play well, averaging about 19 points, 6.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. As the second round brought Atlanta, Johnson would have solid contributions as one of 5 Celtics to average double figures, while also leading the team in assists, as Boston would pull out a relatively easy gentleman's sweep, as Johnson would hit double figures in every game, including a Game 1 double-double. The conference finals brought Milwaukee, and the Celtics continued their postseason dominance as they would easily sweep the Bucks, with Johnson putting up about 15 points and 5 assists per game, while also averaging 2.5 steals, as the Celtics had made their trip to the finals look like a walk in the park, and this time waiting for them would be a young Houston Rockets team. Johnson would only shoot about 42% for the series, but he would stuff the stat sheet, averaging about 17 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals per game. Boston would easily take the first 2 games, as Johnson would have a great game 1, with 19 points, 11 rebounds, 8 assists, and 4 steals. Houston would win 2 of the next 3 games, even though Johnson averaged over 18 points in those games. But Boston would complete the dream season with an easy Game 6 win, even though Johnson put up just 10 points on 5 of 13 shooting. But it didn't matter, as the Celtics were world champs once again, and Johnson had his 3rd ring. As for the regular season, he would average about 15.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 6 assists per game. The Celtics would continue their elite play in '87, but they would be without Walton, as injuries would limit him to just 10 games. It was the same old story in Boston, with their big 3 leading the way, and Johnson quietly directing it all. His scoring had dropped, but he supplemented that by dishing a then career-high 7.5 assists per game. He would still hit double figures in 56 games and record 14 double-doubles. And although the Celtics couldn't replicate last year's regular season success, they would get close, with a big reason for that being their top 5 scoring defense, as Johnson would make a return to all-defensive first team. Yet this would also mark his final all-defense selection. Overall, the Celtics would finish at 59-23 and again get the top seed in the East and a first-round matchup with Chicago. The games would be closer, but the result would be the same, as Boston would sweep Chicago, with Johnson playing great, as he averaged over 19 points, nearly 8 assists, and 2 steals per game, which included a 24-point, 10-assist double-double in Game 3. Their second-round series versus Milwaukee would go the distance, but the Celtics would outlast the Bucks, and Johnson had his fingerprints all over this series, as he would average about 22 points and 10 assists on over 51% shooting, with him recording double-doubles in 5 of the 7 games, setting up a conference finals matchup with Detroit. Offensively, Johnson would have a down series, as he would average less than 14 points on about 39% shooting. However, he would average a team-leading 8 assists, as well as help hold Isaiah Thomas to about 43% shooting. Yet one thing Thomas was doing a good job of was taking care of the ball.
Great numbers.
And going into Game 5, the Pistons had won 2 straight to even the series and were up by 1 late in the game. And after a loose ball was deemed out off of Boston, all Thomas had to do was complete an inbound pass. But he would make a crucial mistake.
Basketball.
Thomas wants to get it in quickly. Does to Lambeer. Stolen by Bird on the cut to DJ. Yes!
In one of the most famous plays of all time, Bird would steal Thomas's rushed pass and get the ball to a cutting Johnson, who would lay it up with 1 second left to give Boston the win. And even though Detroit would even the series in Game 6, Boston would outlast them to take Game 7, with Johnson putting up double-doubles in each of the final 2 games, as the Celtics were heading to their 4th consecutive NBA Finals. Waiting for them was the usual opponent of Magic Johnson and the Lakers. But this time, a prime Magic would be a little too much for a 32-year-old Dennis Johnson, as Magic averaged about 26 points and 13 assists on over 54% shooting. But DJ would do his best to match the offensive output, as he would average over 21 and 9 on about 48% shooting, and would record 4 double-doubles in the series, as well as put up 25 points and 11 assists to help keep Boston alive with a Game 5 win. Yet even though Johnson had a game-high 33 points along with 10 boards in Game 6, Boston would fall, as they missed out on another chance to repeat, as Johnson's season had seen him average about 13.5 points, 3.5 rebounds.
Bro, Dennis Johnson had a solid career. First team all defense. We can't forget about All NBA, Finals MVP, 3 chips. Wow. Hey, he's underrated, man. Gotta put some respect on Dennis Johnson's name, man.
And 7.5 assists per game. The '88 Celtics would be the final great year of the dynasty, but they had picked up who was supposed to be the next great Celtic in the first round of the draft, in Northeastern's Reggie Lewis. Johnson continued as the team's starting point guard, but his scoring and efficiency would continue to dip. However, he would have his most prolific passing season, as he would lead the team in assists on a career-high 7.8 per game, and would hit double figures in 55 games, along with recording 19 double-doubles. And although the Celtics still had a top 3 scoring offense, their scoring defense would be in the bottom half of the league, as this was their first time falling out of the top 5 since Johnson's arrival. But their great offense was more than enough to keep them winning, as they would again have the East's best record at 57-25, and would get a first-round matchup with New York. Johnson would continue upping his play in the postseason, as for the series he would average about 18 points and 9.5 assists on 50% shooting, along with nearly 2.5 steals per game, as he would even record a 19-point, 10-rebound, 12-assist triple-double in a Game 4 win to take the series and advance to a second-round matchup with Atlanta. This series would go the distance and is most famous for Bird's legendary Game 7 battle with Dominique Wilkins, as Johnson would give Boston solid contributions of about 14 points and close to 8 assists per game, and would record 2 double-doubles, as he would score 16 points on over 54% shooting in their Game 7 win. So the Celtics would get a conference finals rematch with Detroit. Johnson would again have a good series, averaging about 16 points and 8 assists per game, and defensively would help hold Thomas to about 43% shooting and over 4 turnovers per game. But this marked the end of the Celtics dynasty, as Detroit would eliminate them in 6 games, with Johnson's season seeing him average about 12.5 points, 3 rebounds, and 8 assists per game. After the season, Jones would retire and be replaced with assistant Jimmy Rogers for 1989. Boston would get a great season out of the second-year Reggie Lewis, but this was out of necessity, as after appearing in just 6 games, Bird was shut down for the season after undergoing surgery to remove bone spurs in his heels. And while Lewis was good, he was no Bird. Johnson's production continued to dip, as this would be his final season of his career averaging double-digit points, yet his 6.6 assists per game would still lead the team. And even though the Celtics possessed a top 10 scoring offense and defense, they were only able to manage a 42-40 record. But luckily, this would be enough for the final playoff spot in the East and a matchup with Detroit. Yet they were swept by the Pistons, as a late season ankle injury would have Johnson come off the bench in the first 2 games and be ineffective. Then even though he started Game 3, he managed an uneventful 25 minutes, as his season ended with him averaging about 10 points, 2.5 rebounds, and 6.5 assists per game. Bird was back for 1990, and Johnson had began the season willingly coming off the bench as a backup to the younger John Bagley, but an early season shoulder injury would thrust Johnson back into the starting lineup, where at 35 years old, he would perform admirably, as his 6.5 assists would be second on the team to Bird, and he would also average over a steal per game, marking his 14th straight season doing so. And even though the Celtics were aging, a much healthier year out of Bird was enough for a 10-game improvement, as they would finish the season at 52-30 and get a first-round matchup with New York. And although the series would go the distance, New York would come out on top, as Johnson played incredibly, hitting double figures in 4 out of the 5 games, while shooting over 48% from the field, and even recording a 21-point, 10-assist double-double in their Game 5 loss, as Johnson's season had seen him average about 7 points, 6.5 assists, and a steal per game. Johnson was not offered a new contract after the season, but at 35 years old, he didn't have much left, as he would choose to retire. And then sadly in 2007, he would pass away at the age of 52. And perhaps more tragic was that as an obvious Hall of Fame worthy player, it took 20 years for him to be inducted. And by the time he was, it had already been 3 years since his death. Dennis Johnson has...
Bruh. What you guys think about that? For it to take that long for him to get in, and bro, his stats should have put him in a Hall of Fame. Guys, let me know down in the comment section, man. Come on.
A serious case as the most underrated player of all time. He was a 5-time All-Star and made 9 consecutive All-Defensive teams.
Right.
He won a Finals MVP by his 3rd year in the league, as already at that point, he showed that he shined brightest in the big moment. But he was also unassuming, and aside from some big dunks in his early years, he was the furthest thing from flashy. And although his defense was top tier, defense is something that you couldn't evaluate by the numbers. And looking at Johnson's numbers, nothing jumps out at you. But that's because he was complete, as he was great at pretty much every aspect of the game. But if you're building a basketball team, Dennis Johnson is exactly the type of player you want. Sure, he had attitude issues early in his career, but it didn't affect his play. And everywhere he went, he won. As after missing the playoffs as a rookie, he never missed them again, and always upped his play come the postseason. He would never pump his own tires, no matter how well he performed. But having Magic Johnson call you the greatest backcourt defender of all time is all the evidence you need.
Come on, man. The evidence is right there in front of us. Were the numbers, of course, the numbers weren't flashy, of course. But come on, man. The contribution 1979 Finals MVP, 3-time champ, All NBA defensive team, 9 times, 5-time All Star. Come on, man. At least he's in the Hall of Fame, but it took way too long.
Magic Johnson call you the greatest backcourt defender of all time is all the evidence you need. But that's it for today's episode on the late, great Dennis Johnson. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one.
Hey man, that was a great video. Forgotten is let me know down in the comment section. Is Dennis Johnson forgotten? Right, he's so underrated, but he's not mentioned. And as it was said in the video, in the conversation with point guards, number one, two-way point guard, offense and defense. Being able to set up the offense, being able to get your teammates involved with assists, being able to score, and then being able to put the clamps on your opposition, man. Super underrated, man. Hit that like button. Subscribe for some more old school basketball content. And I'll catch you guys on the next reaction.